I've been in this league for 11 years. 11 years of spotlights, camera flashes, endorsement deals that felt more like handcuffs than opportunities. 11 years of learning that fame doesn't make you happy. It just makes you visible. And visibility in this world is dangerous. I'm Marcus Reed, shooting guard for the Portland Pioneers, two-time All-Star. One championship ring that sits in a drawer somewhere in my downtown apartment, gathering dust like a relic from someone else's life. The media calls me quiet. My teammates call me distant. My agent calls me difficult. I call myself careful because I've seen what this league does to people. I've watched rookies come in with fire in their eyes and leave 3 years later with nothing but debt, broken marriages, and Instagram pages full of lies. I've seen veterans lose everything chasing relevance. I've seen coaches sacrifice their souls for one more season. I've seen agents turn players into products, and products don't get to be human. So I keep my head down. I show up. I do my job. I don't make waves. Until the night I met Jaylen Carter. It was late October, 2 weeks into the preseason. We just finished a brutal practice. Coach Stevens had been riding us hard ever since the front office told him his job depended on this season's performance. The energy in the gym had been toxic all day. Guys snapping at each other, egos flaring. The usual preseason tension multiplied by corporate pressure. The organization was in a weird place. We'd missed the playoffs 2 years in a row, and ownership was getting impatient. They'd brought in new executives, corporate types who talked about analytics and brand value more than they talked about winning. David Chen, the new VP of basketball operations, had been sitting courtside during practices all week, clipboard in hand, watching us like we were stocks he was deciding whether to keep or sell. That kind of energy changes a locker room. It makes everyone paranoid. It makes veterans worry about their contracts. It makes young guys desperate to prove themselves. It turns teammates into competitors and trust into a luxury nobody can afford. I'd learned to ignore it. I'd learned to tune out the noise and focus on what I could control, my preparation, my craft, my peace of mind. But even I could feel the tension that day. It was in the way guys avoided eye contact during drills. It was in the way Coach Stevens kept checking his phone between sets. It was in the air, thick and suffocating. I stayed late to work on my shot. I always do. The gym at night is the only place I feel like myself anymore. Empty, quiet, just the sound of the ball hitting the floor and the swish of the net. No expectations, no cameras, no one asking me to be something I'm not. The maintenance staff had already started turning off sections of the overhead lights, leaving only the baseline bulbs on. The court looked different at night. Smaller, more intimate, like it belonged to me and nobody else. I ran through my shooting routine, the same one I'd been doing since high school, catch and shoot from the corners, pull-ups from the elbows, step-backs from the wings, rhythm, repetition, muscle memory, the meditation of basketball. That's when I saw him. He was sitting on the floor near the far baseline, back against the padded wall, knees pulled up to his chest. Jaylen Carter, the kid we'd picked up in the second round, 53rd overall. 6'4" guard from a small college in North Carolina that nobody had heard of. Undrafted talent with a chip on his shoulder and a 10-day contract that the front office made clear could disappear any moment. He looked exhausted. Not the kind of tired you get from practice, the kind that lives in your bones, the kind that comes from carrying weight nobody else can see. I grabbed my towel and water bottle, planning to head to the locker room, but something made me stop. Maybe it was the way he was sitting there, staring at nothing. Maybe it was the way his hands were shaking slightly, even though the gym wasn't cold. Maybe it was because I remembered being 20 years old and scared out of my mind, wondering if I'd survive long enough to prove I belonged. I walked over, my footsteps echoing in the empty space. "Hey," I said. "You good?" He looked up, startled, like he'd forgotten anyone else was still in the building. His eyes were red. Not from crying, from exhaustion, from hunger maybe, from fear. "Yeah," he said quickly, straightening up. "Yeah, I'm good. Just, cooling down." I nodded, studying him. His practice gear hung loose on his frame. Too loose. The team-issued sneakers looked like the only new thing he owned. His gym bag was half-zipped, and I could see inside. One change of clothes, a phone charger, a toothbrush. That was it. No deodorant, no extra socks, no wallet that I could see. "You eat today?" I asked. The question caught him off guard. He hesitated, then shrugged, trying to play it off. "Had a protein bar this morning." "That's it?" He didn't answer. He didn't have to. I could see it in his face. The shame of admitting he was struggling. The pride that kept him from asking for help. The fear that if anyone knew the truth, they'd see him as weak. I sat down next to him on the floor. The gym lights hummed above us, casting long shadows across the court. Somewhere in the building, a janitor was running a floor buffer. The sound echoed through the empty space, lonely and mechanical. "What's your situation?" I asked quietly. Jaylen stared at the court. His jaw tightened. For a moment, I thought he wasn't going to answer. Then he spoke, and his voice was so quiet I almost didn't hear him. "I got nothing, man. Contract's not guaranteed. They're paying me per diem, but that barely covers the motel I'm staying at. Can't afford an apartment yet. Can't afford anything, really. I've been eating whatever I can find. Protein bars from the gas station, vending machine snacks. Sometimes the assistant coaches leave food in the film room after meetings, so I grab that when no one's looking. But today there was nothing." He let out a breath, like admitting it out loud had taken something from him. "I'm not complaining," he added quickly, looking at me with those red, exhausted eyes. "I'm grateful to be here. I know I'm lucky. Most guys from my school don't even get a shot at this level. I don't know how long I can keep going like this. I'm so tired, man, and I'm so hungry I can't even think straight during drills." He stopped. He wiped his face with the back of his hand, embarrassed. "I'm sorry," he said. "You don't need to hear this. I shouldn't have—" "Stop," I said. "You don't need to apologize." I looked at him, really looked at him. This kid was probably 6'4" and maybe 175 pounds soaking wet. He had the build of someone who'd been athletic his whole life, but had never had consistent access to good nutrition. His shoulders were thin. His cheeks were hollow. There were dark circles under his eyes that no amount of sleep would fix because they came from stress and fear and the constant, gnawing uncertainty of not knowing if tomorrow would be his last day. "I've been where you are," I said. He looked at me, surprised. "You?" I nodded. Different circumstances. Same fear. My rookie year, I was the 15th pick. High enough that people expected things from me, low enough that I was expendable if I didn't deliver immediately. I had a guaranteed contract, but I didn't have anyone. My dad wasn't around. Never was. My mom was working 2 jobs back home in Detroit just to keep the lights on and the rent paid. I sent money back every month because I couldn't stand the thought of her still struggling while I was living this dream, which meant I didn't have much left over for myself. I paused, remembering those days. The fear, the isolation, the constant anxiety. "I lived off ramen and peanut butter sandwiches for 6 months," I continued. "I wore the same 3 outfits on repeat. I didn't go out. I didn't party. I couldn't afford to. And I was terrified every single day that I'd get cut and lose everything. Not just for me, but for my mom, who was counting on me." Jaylen was listening now, really listening. His eyes were locked on mine. "How'd you make it?" he asked. And there was desperation in his voice, like he needed to know there was a way through this. I shrugged. "Somebody helped me. A veteran on that team, big guy named Ray Mitchell, played center. 6'11", 280 pounds, mean as hell on the court, but the kindest man I've ever met off it. He saw me struggling one day in the locker room. I was sitting by myself, trying to figure out how to stretch $20 until the next paycheck. He didn't say anything at first, just started inviting me to dinner. Casual, like it was no big deal. He'd say, "Reed, I'm grabbing food after this, you coming?" And I'd go because I was too hungry to say no and too proud to admit why I was saying yes. I smiled at the memory. Ray never made it awkward, never made me feel like charity. He just paid for my meals without mentioning it. Let me order whatever I wanted. And after a few weeks when I couldn't make rent one month because I'd sent too much home, he let me crash at his place. Didn't ask questions, didn't make me explain. He just said, "You need a place? I got a couch." And that couch saved my life. "Where's he now?" Jaylen asked. "Retired. Coaching high school ball in Texas. We still talk a few times a year. I send his kids Christmas gifts. He changed my life and he never asked for anything back. Never told anyone. Never posted about it. He just did it because he remembered what it was like to be young and broke and scared." Jaylen nodded slowly. He wiped his face again, and I could see him trying to keep it together. "I'm not Ray Mitchell," I said, "but I remember what it felt like to be hungry and scared and invisible. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to come with me right now. We're going to get food. Real food. Not protein bars. Not vending machine garbage. Then you're going to sleep somewhere clean and safe. And tomorrow morning you're going to show up to practice and ball out like your life depends on it. Because it does. But you can't do that on an empty stomach and 2 hours of sleep in a roach motel." He stared at me, and for a moment I thought he was going to refuse. His pride was written all over his face, but then I saw something else. Relief. The relief of not having to carry the weight alone anymore. Man, I can't ask you to. You're not asking, I said firmly. I'm telling you. Let's go. I stood up and held out my hand. He looked at it for a long moment, like he was trying to decide if this was real or some kind of test, like he was trying to figure out what I wanted from him in return. But when I didn't lower my hand, when I just stood there waiting, he finally took it, and I pulled him to his feet. We left the gym together in silence, walking through the empty corridors of the practice facility. Our footsteps echoed off the walls. The trophy cases gleamed under the emergency lights. Photos of franchise legends stared down at us from the walls. Guys who'd made it, guys who'd survived, guys who'd become immortal in this building. I wondered if anyone had helped them when they were struggling. I wondered how many of them had sat on a gym floor at night, too hungry and too scared to ask for help. We got to the parking garage, and Jaylen stopped when he saw my car, a simple black sedan, nothing flashy. He seemed surprised. I thought you'd drive something, nicer, he said. I used to, I said, unlocking the doors. Had a Maserati my second year. Stupid expensive. Broke down constantly. One day I realized I was spending more time worrying about the car than enjoying it. So I sold it and bought this. It's reliable. It gets me where I need to go. That's all that matters. We got in, and I drove us out of the garage and into the Portland night. The city was alive with lights and movement, people everywhere living their lives, unaware of the kid sitting next to me who hadn't eaten a real meal in days. I took him to a diner on the east side of the city, a place I'd been going to for years, away from the downtown spots where players and media hung out. It was called Rose's, run by an older woman named Rose, who'd been serving food there since the 80s. The building was small and worn, with a flickering neon sign out front and cracked vinyl booths inside, but the food was honest and the atmosphere was real. We walked in, and Rose looked up from behind the counter. She smiled when she saw me. "Marcus," she said warmly, "haven't seen you in a few weeks. Thought maybe you finally got sick of my cooking." "Never, Rose," I said. "Just been busy. This is Jaylen. He's new to the team." Rose looked at Jaylen, and I saw her eyes take him in. The thin frame, the exhausted face, the way he stood like he wasn't sure he belonged. She didn't say anything, just nodded and grabbed 2 menus. "Sit wherever you want, honey," she said to Jaylen, and there was kindness in her voice. We slid into a corner booth, the vinyl seats held together with duct tape but surprisingly comfortable. The menu was laminated and sticky, the kind that had been wiped down 10,000 times but never quite came clean. "Order whatever you want," I said. Jaylen looked at the menu like it was written in a foreign language. His hands were shaking slightly. I realized he was overwhelmed, not by the choices, but by the fact that someone was offering him a choice at all. "Everything here is good," I said gently. "Rose makes a burger that'll change your life. The fries are perfect. The milkshakes are ridiculous. Just get whatever sounds good." He finally nodded and ordered a bacon cheeseburger, fries, a chocolate milkshake, and a side of wings, then immediately looked at me, embarrassed. "Is that too much?" "Stop," I said. "Order more if you want. I'm serious." I ordered the same thing. When Rose brought the food 15 minutes later, I watched Jaylen try to eat slowly, try to maintain some dignity, but within minutes he gave up and just ate like he needed it, which he did. He finished the burger in maybe 4 minutes. The fries disappeared. The wings vanished. The milkshake went down like water. When he was done, he sat back and closed his eyes for a moment, and I saw something I'll never forget. The look of someone who just remembered what it felt like to be human. "Thank you," he said quietly. "Don't thank me yet," I said. "We're not done." I paid the bill, left Rose a big tip, and drove Jaylen to my building downtown. A modern high-rise with a doorman and security, and the kind of polished marble floors that always made me feel a little uncomfortable, like I was playing dress-up as someone successful. We rode the elevator up to the 12th floor in silence. I unlocked the door to my apartment and let him in. It wasn't huge. 2 bedrooms, a living room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, a kitchen I barely used. But it was clean and quiet and safe. "Guest room's down the hall," I said. "It's nothing fancy, but there's a bed, a bathroom, Wi-Fi, whatever you need. Stay as long as you need to get on your feet." Jaylen walked slowly to the guest room and stood in the doorway, staring inside like he couldn't believe it was real. The room was simple. A queen bed with clean white sheets, a dresser, a small desk, a window with blackout curtains, and an attached bathroom. Nothing extravagant. But to him, in that moment, it must have looked like a 5-star hotel. He set his gym bag down on the floor and turned to me. His eyes were glassy. "Man, why are you doing this?" he asked, and his voice cracked slightly. "You don't even know me." I looked at him and saw myself at 20, scared, alone, trying to survive in a world that didn't care if I succeeded or failed. Because someone did it for me, I said, and because you deserve a fair shot. You can't play your best when you're worried about where your next meal is coming from or where you're going to sleep. Basketball is hard enough without carrying that weight. He nodded, and a tear slipped down his cheek. He wiped it away quickly, embarrassed. I won't forget this, he said, I promise. When I make it, when I'm established, I'm going to do this for someone else. I swear. Good, I said. That's how it works. That's how it's supposed to work. I left him alone and went to my own room. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring out at the city lights blinking in the darkness. Portland spread out below me like a circuit board, glowing and alive, full of people chasing dreams and running from nightmares. I thought about Ray Mitchell. I thought about the night he'd let me sleep on his couch, how he'd left a blanket folded on the armrest, and a note that said, "Stay as long as you need." I thought about how that simple act of kindness had saved me, had given me the stability I needed to survive my rookie year, had shown me that humanity still existed in this business. I'd never forgotten it, and I'd always promised myself that if I ever saw someone struggling the way I had, I'd do the same thing. Tonight, I'd kept that promise. I didn't do it for recognition. I didn't do it for a story. I didn't even do it because I thought it would change anything beyond helping one kid eat and sleep. I did it because it was the right thing to do. But the next day, everything changed, and I realized that sometimes doing the right thing has consequences you never see coming. The consequences started with a single moment in the locker room, and they ended with an entire team standing up for me when I needed them most. But I'm getting ahead of myself. First, I had to survive the morning. I woke up at 5:30, same as always. My body has been programmed for early mornings since high school, back when I had to wake up before dawn to work out before classes, before my mom left for her first shift, before the world started moving. Old habits die hard. Even on days when I don't have practice until 10, I still wake up before the sun, unable to sleep past that internal alarm clock that's been ticking for 15 years. I lay in bed for a few minutes, staring at the ceiling, watching the shadows shift as the first light of morning crept through the blinds. My mind was already running through the day ahead. Film session at 9, practice at 10:30, strength training after that, then media availability if anyone wanted to talk to me, which they usually didn't. Then I remembered Jaylen. I got up quietly and walked down the hallway, stopping outside the guest room. The door was closed. I pressed my ear against it and heard nothing. No movement, no breathing loud enough to hear through the wood. For a second, I worried he'd left in the middle of the night, too proud or too scared to accept help. But then I saw his worn sneakers sitting by the door, laces still tied, and I relaxed. He was still here. I went to the kitchen and started making breakfast. Nothing fancy. Scrambled eggs, turkey bacon, toast, fresh fruit, orange juice. The kind of meal my mom used to make when she had time, back when I was a kid and she worked night shifts so she could be home in the mornings. Comfort food. The kind that reminds you someone cares. I was plating everything when I heard the guest room door open. Jaylen appeared in the hallway, wearing the same clothes from last night, his hair sticking up in every direction, his eyes still heavy with sleep. He looked confused for a moment, like he'd forgotten where he was. Then he saw me and the food on the counter, and his expression changed to something I couldn't quite read. Gratitude mixed with disbelief, mixed with shame. "Morning," I said casually, like this was normal. "You hungry?" He nodded slowly, moving into the kitchen like he was walking on sacred ground. "Yeah, thank you. You didn't have to—" "Stop," I said, handing him a plate. "Eat. We've got film at 9. You'll need the energy." We sat at the small dining table by the window, the city waking up below us. The sun was just starting to rise, painting the buildings in shades of orange and gold. Portland looked peaceful at this hour, before the traffic and the noise and the chaos of the day took over. Jaylen ate slowly this time, deliberately. He wasn't starving anymore. Last night's meal had taken care of that. But he ate like someone who'd learned not to take food for granted. Every bite was intentional. Every swallow was conscious. "How'd you sleep?" I asked. "Best I've slept in weeks," he said quietly. "That bed is... Man, I forgot what a real bed felt like. The motel I was staying at had a mattress that felt like cardboard, and the walls were so thin I could hear everything. Couldn't ever really rest, you know? Always on edge. But last night, I actually slept. "Good," I said. "You're going to need it. Coach has been on one lately. Front office is breathing down his neck, so he's breathing down ours." Jaylen nodded, his jaw tightening. "I know. I can feel it." Everyone's stressed. Everyone's competing for spots. It's like we're supposed to be a team, but it feels like everyone's just trying to survive. That's the business, I said, especially at this time of year. Roster spots aren't guaranteed until opening night. The front office is still evaluating, still looking for reasons to cut guys or make trades. It makes everyone paranoid. He looked at me, his fork pausing halfway to his mouth. Are you worried? About your spot? I shook my head. Not anymore. I've been here long enough, and my contract's guaranteed. But I remember what it was like when I wasn't sure. That fear doesn't leave you even after you make it. You just learn to carry it differently. We finished breakfast in comfortable silence. When we were done, I told him to shower and get ready. We'd drive to the facility together. He hesitated. You don't have to do that. I can take the bus or... We're going to the same place at the same time, I said. It doesn't make sense for you to take the bus. Just ride with me. He nodded, and I saw him relax slightly. Okay. Thanks, Marcus. For everything. Don't thank me yet, I said again. We haven't gotten through practice. 30 minutes later, we were in my car, driving through the morning traffic toward the practice facility. The radio was on low, some early morning talk show discussing last night's game between Miami and Boston. Jaylen stared out the window, watching the city pass by. Can I ask you something? He said suddenly. Sure. Why don't you talk much? In the locker room, I mean. You're always quiet. Some of the guys think you don't like them. I glanced at him, then back at the road. It's not that I don't like them. I just learned a long time ago that talking for the sake of talking doesn't help anyone. Most people in this league talk too much. To the media, to each other, to themselves. They talk about what they're going to do instead of just doing it. They talk about loyalty and brotherhood and then stab each other in the back the second it benefits them. I got tired of the noise, so I stay quiet. I let my game speak. But doesn't that make you lonely? He asked. Like, don't you ever want to just connect with someone? I thought about that for a moment. Yeah, I said honestly. Sometimes. But connection in this league is complicated. Everyone wants something from you. Teammates want you to make them look good. Coaches want you to fit into their system. Media wants you to give them headlines. Agents want you to sign deals. Fans want you to be a hero. It's exhausting, always being wanted for what you can do instead of who you are. So I keep to myself. It's safer that way. Jaylen was quiet for a moment. Then he said softly, You didn't do that with me. Last night. You helped me and you didn't want anything back. I looked at him. That's different. How? Because you weren't asking me to be Marcus Reed, two-time All-Star. You were just a kid who needed help. That's real. Everything else is just noise. He nodded slowly, like he was trying to understand something bigger than our conversation. We pulled into the facility parking lot at 8:45. A few other cars were already there. Coach Stevens' black SUV, a couple of the assistant coach's vehicles, and David Chen's sleek silver Tesla. The sight of Chen's car made my stomach tighten slightly. He'd been watching practices all week, clipboard in hand, analyzing everything. It made everyone uncomfortable. We walked into the building together, through the main entrance with its polished floors and framed jerseys lining the walls. The receptionist, a woman named Angela, who'd been with the organization for 20 years, smiled when she saw me. Morning, Marcus, she said warmly. And good morning to you too, she added, looking at Jaylen. Morning, Angela, I said. We headed down the corridor toward the locker room. As we got closer, I could hear voices. Guys already there, getting ready, talking, the usual pre-game energy starting to build. But when we walked through the door, the energy shifted. Everyone looked up. Everyone saw us walk in together. And I saw something flash across their faces. Surprise, curiosity, judgment, and in a few cases, respect. Darius Thompson, our starting power forward and the most vocal guy on the team, was sitting on the bench tying his shoes. He was 6'9", 240 pounds of muscle and swagger, with a personality that filled every room he entered. Everyone called him D-Train, because once he got going, nothing could stop him. He looked up at us, his eyes narrowing slightly. Well, well, he said loudly, his voice carrying across the locker room. Look who rolled in together. Reed and the Rook. Y'all have a sleepover or something? A few guys laughed. It wasn't malicious. D-Train's humor never was. But it put a spotlight on us that I hadn't wanted. Something like that, I said calmly, moving to my locker. Jaylen went to his locker on the other side of the room, his head down, clearly uncomfortable with the attention. I could see him trying to disappear, trying to blend into the background. But it was too late. Everyone had noticed. Tyler Young, our shooting guard and the team's leading scorer, was leaning against his locker, arms crossed, watching with a smirk. Tyler was talented, maybe the most talented player on the roster, but he was also selfish, arrogant, and more concerned with his stats than winning. He and I had never gotten along. Our games were too similar, and the organization had made it clear they saw him as the future, while I was just a veteran holding down the fort. "That's cute," Tyler said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Reed, playing mentor. What's next, you gonna adopt him?" "Watch your mouth," D-Train said, his tone suddenly serious. There was an edge to his voice that made Tyler's smirk falter. He might have been joking at first, but D-Train knew where the line was. Tyler shrugged and went back to scrolling on his phone, but I could feel the tension he'd created hanging in the air. I changed into my practice gear in silence, ignoring the glances and whispers. This was exactly what I'd been trying to avoid. Attention, judgment, people making assumptions, but I'd known it was a risk. Helping Jaylen publicly would have consequences. I just hoped they wouldn't be too severe. At 9 o'clock sharp, we filed into the film room. Coach Stevens was already there, standing at the front with his arms crossed, his face set in that permanent scowl he'd been wearing all preseason. Next to him, sitting in the front row with his clipboard and tablet, was David Chen. Chen was in his early 40s, sharp suit, perfectly styled hair, the kind of guy who'd never played basketball but had an MBA from Stanford and thought that made him qualified to run a team. He looked at us like we were numbers on a spreadsheet, investments that either performed or got cut. "All right, listen up," Coach Stevens said, his voice cutting through the room. "We're reviewing yesterday's scrimmage, and let me tell you, it was ugly. Sloppy passes, lazy rotations, no communication. We're 2 weeks from the season opener, and we're playing like a summer league team." He clicked the remote, and the film started playing on the screen. For the next 45 minutes, he broke down every mistake, every missed assignment, every moment of hesitation. He called out players by name, some more harshly than others. When he got to a sequence where Jaylen had missed a rotation and given up an easy layup, he paused the film. "Carter," Stevens said sharply. "What are you doing here?" Jaylen sat up straighter, his voice uncertain. "I thought Williams was going to help, so I stayed on my man." "You thought wrong," Stevens snapped. "In this system, you rotate. Always. If you can't figure that out, you won't be here long." David Chen made a note on his tablet. I saw Jaylen's shoulders slump slightly. The film session finally ended, and we headed to the court for practice. The energy was heavy, the pressure palpable. Guys were on edge, trying to prove themselves, trying to avoid being the next one called out. Coach ran us through drills, defensive rotations, transition offense, pick and roll coverage. Everything was sharp, intense, competitive. And through it all, I watched Jaylen. He was trying so hard, giving everything he had, but he was still a step slow, still adjusting to the speed of professional basketball. He wasn't bad. He was just raw, unpolished, the kind of player who needed time to develop. But time was a luxury he didn't have. Halfway through practice, during a scrimmage, it happened. Jaylen drove to the basket and got fouled hard by Tyler Young, an unnecessary, aggressive foul that sent Jaylen crashing to the floor. The whistle blew, but Tyler didn't help him up. He just stood over him, talking trash. "Come on, Rook," Tyler said. "You gotta be tougher than that. This is the league, not college." Jaylen got to his feet slowly, rubbing his shoulder where he'd hit the ground. He didn't say anything, just walked to the free throw line. But I saw something shift in the locker room dynamic at that moment. D-Train walked over to Tyler and got in his face. "Yo, chill out," he said firmly. "That was dirty." "It's basketball," Tyler shot back. "If he can't handle it, he shouldn't be here." Coach Stevens blew his whistle. "Enough. Both of you run a lap." They ran their laps, but the tension remained. I could feel it spreading through the team. Some guys siding with Tyler, some uncomfortable with what had happened, some just trying to stay out of it. During a water break, D-Train walked over to me. "Your boy okay?" he asked quietly, nodding toward Jaylen. "He'll be fine," I said. "Just getting hazed." D-Train nodded. "Tyler's been a punk lately. Front office got him thinking he's untouchable. Someone needs to check him." "That someone doesn't need to be you," I said. "Don't get yourself in trouble." D-Train smiled, but there was something serious in his eyes. "Sometimes standing up is worth the trouble, Marcus." Practice ended at noon. We went through our cool-down, stretching and foam rolling, the usual routine. I noticed David Chen talking to Coach Stevens near the sideline, both of them looking at their tablets, occasionally glancing at Jaylen. My stomach tightened. That couldn't be good. As we filtered back into the locker room, I pulled Jaylen aside. You good? I asked. He nodded, but I could see the doubt in his eyes. I don't know, man. I feel like I'm messing up every play. Like I don't belong here. That's normal, I said. Every rookie feels that way. Just keep working. Keep showing up. That's all you can control. He nodded again, but he didn't look convinced. We showered and changed in silence. As I was packing up my bag, Coach Stevens appeared in the doorway. Reed, he said. My office. Now. My heart sank. I followed him down the hall to his office, a small room with a desk covered in playbooks and game film and empty coffee cups. He closed the door behind us and gestured for me to sit. What's going on with you and Carter? He asked, getting straight to the point. Nothing, I said. I'm just helping him out. Helping him how? I hesitated, then decided honesty was the best approach. He was struggling. No money, no food, no place to stay. I gave him a meal and a place to sleep. That's it. Coach Stevens leaned back in his chair, studying me. And you didn't think to tell me about this? It wasn't something that needed to be reported, I said. It was personal. Personal, he repeated. Marcus, everything you do reflects on this team. If something happens to that kid while he's staying with you, it becomes a liability. For you, for me, for the organization. Nothing's going to happen, I said firmly. I'm just giving him a stable place until he gets on his feet. Stevens sighed, rubbing his temples. Look, I get it. I respect what you're doing. Hell, I wish more veterans took that kind of interest in the young guys. But you need to understand the position this puts me in. David Chen is already looking for reasons to cut costs, to trim the roster. If he thinks Carter is a distraction or a problem, he's not a problem, I interrupted. He's a good kid who deserves a chance. Maybe, Stevens said. But that's not for you to decide. That's on me in the front office. And right now, Chen is looking for any excuse to cut him loose. Then don't give him one, I said, standing up. Give Jaylen a real chance. Let him develop. He's got talent. He just needs time. Stevens looked at me for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. I'll do what I can. But Marcus, be careful. The front office doesn't care about feel-good stories. They care about production and profit. If this blows up, it's on both of you. I left his office with a knot in my stomach. When I got back to the locker room, most of the guys had already left. But D-Train was still there, sitting on the bench, waiting. What did Coach want? He asked. Just checking in, I lied. D-Train didn't buy it. He studied me for a moment, then stood up and put a hand on my shoulder. Whatever it is, he said, you did the right thing helping that kid. Don't let them make you feel bad about it. I nodded, grateful for his words, even if I couldn't fully accept them yet. I found Jaylen waiting by my car in the parking lot, his gym bag slung over his shoulder, his face drawn with exhaustion and worry. We drove back to my apartment in silence. The weight of the day hung between us like a storm cloud. When we got inside, Jaylen went straight to the guest room without a word. I stood in my living room, staring out at the city, wondering if I'd made the right choice, wondering if helping one person was worth the risk of losing everything I'd built, wondering if kindness in this world was a strength or a weakness. I didn't have the answers yet, but I knew that tomorrow, everything would come to a head, and I would have to decide who I really was, Marcus Reed, the careful veteran who played it safe, or Marcus Reed, the man who stood by his principles no matter the cost. The truth was, I'd already made that choice the moment I sat down next to Jaylen on that gym floor. Now I just had to live with the consequences. The next morning came too fast. I woke up with a sense of dread sitting heavy in my chest, the kind you feel when you know something bad is coming, but you can't stop it. The sky outside my window was gray and overcast, matching the mood that had settled over me since my conversation with Coach Stevens yesterday. Jaylen was already awake when I walked into the kitchen. He was sitting at the table, staring at his phone, his face pale. When he heard me, he looked up, and I could see the fear in his eyes. "Morning," I said, trying to sound normal. "You eat?" He shook his head. "Not hungry." That was a bad sign. Yesterday he'd eaten like he'd never seen food before. Today he couldn't stomach anything. Something had happened. "What's wrong?" I asked, pouring myself coffee. He turned his phone toward me. On the screen was a text message from an unknown number. It was short and brutal. "Don't get comfortable, you're gone by Friday." "Who sent this?" I asked, feeling anger rise in my chest. "I don't know," Jaylen said, his voice shaking slightly. "But someone from the team has my number. Someone knows I'm on thin ice." I sat down across from him, my jaw tight. "Listen to me. You're not gone. Not if I have anything to say about it." "Marcus, you can't control this," he said, and there was resignation in his voice. "I appreciate everything you've done. Really. But I've been in this situation before. In high school, in college, everywhere. I'm always the guy who's just good enough to be noticed, but not good enough to be kept. It's my story, and I'm tired of fighting it. That's not your story, I said firmly. That's what people told you your story was, but you get to write the ending. You hear me? You get to decide who you are. He looked at me like he wanted to believe it but couldn't. Come on, I said, standing up. Get dressed. We're going in early. You're going to get extra work in before practice. You're going to show them you belong. He hesitated, then nodded slowly. Okay. We arrived at the facility at 7 in the morning, 2 hours before anyone else. The building was quiet, almost eerie in its emptiness. Just the hum of the HVAC system and the echo of our footsteps on the polished floors. We went straight to the gym. I turned on half the lights, enough to see but not so much that it felt like game day. The court stretched out before us, familiar and waiting. All right, I said, grabbing a ball from the rack. We're going to work on your decision-making. That's what coach keeps getting on you about. Hesitation. You're thinking too much instead of reacting. So we're going to run pick-and-roll reads until they're automatic. For the next 90 minutes, we worked. I played defender, threw different coverages at him, made him read and react. At first, he was slow, overthinking every move. But gradually, as the repetitions piled up, something clicked. His movements became smoother. His decisions came faster. He started to trust his instincts. There it is, I said after he made a perfect read and hit a pull-up jumper. That's what they need to see. He was breathing hard, sweat dripping down his face, but he was smiling. For the first time since I'd met him, he looked like he believed in himself. That's when I heard the voice behind us. Well, this is touching. I turned to see David Chen standing at the entrance to the gym, his suit perfectly pressed, his expression unreadable. He had his tablet tucked under his arm and that corporate smile that never reached his eyes. Mr. Chen, I said carefully, didn't expect to see you this early. I could say the same about you two, he replied, walking onto the court. His footsteps echoed in the empty space. Working on some extra development, I see. Just getting some shots up, I said. Chen nodded slowly, his eyes moving from me to Jaylen and back again. Reed, can I speak with you for a moment? Privately? My stomach dropped, but I kept my face neutral. Sure. I looked at Jaylen. Keep working. I'll be right back. We walked off the court, through the tunnel, and into one of the empty meeting rooms. Chen closed the door behind us and gestured for me to sit. I remained standing. I'll make this brief, Chen said, leaning against the table. I've been watching you these past few days. Your relationship with Carter, the extra time you're spending with him. And I have to say, I'm concerned. Concerned about what? I asked. About boundaries, he said smoothly. About the appearance of favoritism. About what happens when a veteran player gets personally involved with a roster decision. I'm not involved in roster decisions, I said. I'm just helping a teammate. Are you? Chen asked, his tone sharpening. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're trying to influence the coaching staff's evaluation of a player who, frankly, hasn't earned his spot yet. He's earned it, I said, my voice rising slightly. He just needs time to develop. Time is money in this business, Chen shot back. And right now, Carter is costing us money without producing results. His per diem, his insurance, his equipment, it all adds up. And for what? So he can be the 15th man on the bench? So he can have a chance, I said. The same chance everyone else got. Not everyone deserves a chance, Chen said coldly. This is professional basketball, Reed, not a charity. We're not here to feel good about ourselves. We're here to win games and make money. And Carter doesn't help us do either of those things. I stared at him, feeling a mix of anger and disgust. Is that what you told yourself when you took this job? That people are just numbers on a spreadsheet? Chen's expression hardened. Be careful, Reed. You might be a veteran with a guaranteed contract, but that doesn't make you untouchable. Keep pushing me, and I'll make your life very uncomfortable. I stepped closer to him, my voice low and controlled. I've been uncomfortable my whole life. I grew up uncomfortable. I played my way into this league uncomfortable. So if you think threatening me is going to make me back down, you don't know me at all. We stood there for a moment, the tension thick enough to cut. Then Chen smiled, that same corporate smile, and picked up his tablet. This conversation is over, but understand this. Carter's contract expires Friday. Unless he does something extraordinary between now and then, he's gone, and there's nothing you can do about it. He walked out, leaving me alone in the room with my anger and frustration. When I got back to the gym, Jaylen was still shooting, but I could see in his body language that he knew something had happened. He didn't ask. He just kept working. We stayed until other players started arriving for the regular practice time. As the locker room filled up, I could feel the energy shifting again. Guys were talking in clusters, glancing at me and Jaylen, whispering. Word had spread about what I was doing, and people had opinions. D-Train pulled me aside as we were getting dressed. "Yo, Marcus," he said quietly. "I heard Chen cornered you this morning. What's going on?" "Nothing I can't handle," I said. "Don't do that," he said. "Don't shut me out. I'm on your side. We're teammates." I looked at him. Really looked at him. D-Train was rough around the edges, loud and sometimes obnoxious, but he was genuine. He was one of the few people in this locker room who still cared about more than just his stats. "They're going to cut Jaylen on Friday," I said quietly. Chen made that clear, and there's nothing I can do about it. D-Train's jaw tightened. "That's messed up. Kid deserves better than that." "Most people do," I said. "Doesn't mean they get it." Practice that day was brutal. Coach Stevens pushed us harder than he had all preseason, running us through conditioning drills until guys were doubled over, gasping for air. It felt punitive, like he was taking out his frustration with the front office on us. During a water break, Tyler Young made his move. He walked over to where Jaylen was sitting, bent down, and said something I couldn't hear, but I saw Jaylen's face change. Saw the hurt and anger flash across his features. Tyler laughed and walked away. I walked over to Jaylen. "What did he say?" Jaylen shook his head. "Nothing. It's fine." "It's not fine," I said. "Tell me." He hesitated, then spoke quietly. "He said I should start looking for a job at Foot Locker, because that's the closest I'll ever get to the league after Friday." Anger surged through me, hot and immediate. I stood up and started walking toward Tyler, but D-Train intercepted me, putting a hand on my chest. "Don't," he said firmly. "Not here. Not now. That's what he wants, to get you in trouble." I stood there, breathing hard, trying to control myself. D-Train was right. Hitting Tyler would only make things worse, but I wanted to. God, I wanted to. "Let me handle it," D-Train said, and there was something in his voice that made me step back. Coach Stevens blew his whistle. "All right, scrimmage time. First team versus second team. Let's go." The scrimmage started, and it was immediately clear that something was different. The intensity was higher, more aggressive, almost violent. Guys were playing angry, playing hurt, playing like they had something to prove. Tyler was guarding me, and he was talking trash the entire time. Every possession, every screen, every cut. "You think you're some kind of hero?" he said as we jostled for position. "Saving the poor rookie? You're pathetic, Reed. You're washed up, and you know it. That's why you're trying to relive your glory days through him." I didn't respond. I just played. I caught the ball on the wing, used a screen from D-Train, and pulled up for three. Swish. I backpedaled down the court without looking at Tyler, but he kept talking, and the more he talked, the more I realized he wasn't just talking about Jaylen. He was talking about me, about my career, about the fact that the organization saw him as the future and me as the past. Next possession, Tyler drove past me and scored easily. He turned to me with a smirk. "See? You can't keep up anymore, old man." That's when D-Train stepped in. On the next play, Tyler tried to drive again, and D-Train set a screen that was borderline dirty, all legal but hard enough that Tyler hit the floor. The whistle blew. "Foul!" Coach Stevens called. Tyler got up, his face red with anger. "What the hell, D?" D-Train looked at him calmly. "That's basketball. If you can't handle it, maybe you should find a job at Foot Locker." The locker room went silent. Everyone had heard what Tyler said to Jaylen, and now D-Train was throwing it back in his face. Tyler's eyes flashed with rage. "You got something to say to me?" "Yeah," D-Train said, stepping closer. "I'm saying you're a punk. You talk big, but you don't have the heart to back it up. You want to pick on a rookie who can't defend himself? That's weak. That's who you are. Weak." Tyler shoved D-Train. "That's enough," Coach Stevens yelled, getting between them. "Both of you out. Hit the showers, now." But D-Train wasn't done. He looked around the locker room at everyone watching. "Y'all see what's happening here?" he said loudly. "We got a kid on this team who's trying his hardest, who's got nobody, and instead of helping him, we're tearing him down. And we got a veteran who's actually doing something good, something real, and the front office is trying to punish him for it. That's not a team. That's not what we're supposed to be about." The room was silent. Every player was watching, listening. D-Train looked at me, then at Jaylen, then back at everyone else. "I don't know about y'all," he said, "but I'm tired of this. I'm tired of the politics. I'm tired of pretending we're brothers when we're really just co-workers protecting our own interests. Marcus did something right. He helped someone. And if the front office has a problem with that, then they can come talk to me about it. He walked out of the gym, leaving the rest of us standing there in stunned silence. Coach Stevens cleared his throat. Practice is over. Everyone out. As we filed back to the locker room, I felt something shifting. I saw it in the way guys looked at me. Not with judgment anymore, but with something else. Respect, maybe. Or recognition. In the locker room, as everyone changed and showered, there was a different energy. Quieter. More thoughtful. Like D-Train's words had cracked something open that had been sealed shut. I was sitting at my locker, staring at my phone, when someone sat down next to me. It was Tyler. Look, he said quietly, and there was no arrogance in his voice now. I was out of line today. What I said to the kid, what I said to you, that wasn't right. I looked at him surprised. Tyler Young didn't apologize. Ever. Why'd you do it? I asked. He was quiet for a moment. Because I'm scared, he admitted. The front office keeps telling me I'm the future, but I see how fast things can change in this league. One injury, one bad season, and I'm out. So I play the game, talk trash, build my brand, put myself first. But watching you with that kid, it reminded me of something I forgot, that we're supposed to look out for each other. He stood up, extended his hand. I'm sorry, Marcus, and I hope the kid makes it. I shook his hand, and he walked away. As I finished getting dressed, I noticed other guys coming up to me. Quietly, one by one, veterans and rookies alike. Some just nodded. Some said a few words of support. Some thanked me for doing what they wished they had the courage to do. By the time I left the facility with Jaylen, something had changed in that locker room. Something had shifted. And I realized that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't alone in this fight anymore. That night, Jaylen and I sat in my apartment, eating takeout and watching game film on my laptop. He was quieter than usual, processing everything that had happened. Marcus, he said finally, why are you really doing this? And don't say it's because someone did it for you. There's more to it than that. I set down my food and thought about his question. He deserved an honest answer. You want the truth? I said. I'm doing this because I'm tired of being silent. I'm tired of watching this league chew people up and spit them out and pretending it's just business. I'm tired of keeping my head down and playing it safe. For 11 years, I've been careful. I've avoided conflict. I've protected myself. And you know what that got me? A championship ring I don't care about and an apartment I feel lonely in. I looked at him. You remind me of who I was before I learned to stop caring. And maybe helping you is my way of remembering that person, of becoming him again. Jaylen's eyes were wet, but he was smiling. Thank you, he said, for seeing me, for believing in me when nobody else did. Don't thank me yet, I said. But this time I was smiling too. We still have to get you through Friday. We will, he said, and there was confidence in his voice now. We will. That night, I slept better than I had in weeks, because for the first time in years, I felt like I was doing something that mattered, something real, something worth fighting for. And tomorrow, I would find out just how far my team was willing to fight with me. Thursday morning arrived with an email that changed everything. I was making coffee when my phone buzzed. A message from Coach Stevens. Mandatory team meeting. 9 a.m. conference room. Everyone required. Jaylen was already awake, sitting at the kitchen table with his laptop open, watching film from last night's practice. He'd been doing that every morning now, studying his mistakes, analyzing his reads, trying to improve. The kid had heart. That much was undeniable. Got a team meeting at 9, I told him. You should eat before we go. He nodded, but didn't look up from the screen. I watched him for a moment, the way his eyes tracked every movement, the way he rewound plays over and over, searching for answers. He reminded me of myself at that age. Hungry, determined, desperate to prove he belonged. We arrived at the facility at 8:30. The parking lot was already full. Every player's car was there, along with the coaching staff and several front office vehicles I didn't recognize. That was unusual. Team meetings didn't typically involve upper management. Inside, the energy was different. Tense. Guys were gathered in small groups, talking in hushed voices. When Jaylen and I walked in, the conversation stopped. Everyone looked at us. D-Train walked over immediately. His face was serious. You see the email? He asked quietly. Yeah, I said. What's this about? Chen called it, D-Train said. Word is he's making an announcement about roster cuts, and he wants everyone there to hear it. My stomach tightened. This was it. They were going to cut Jaylen in front of the entire team. Public execution. A message to everyone about what happens when you don't produce fast enough. I looked at Jaylen. His face had gone pale, but his jaw was set. He knew. Whatever happens in there, I said to him, you hold your head up. You hear me? You've got nothing to be ashamed of. You did everything they asked and more. He nodded, but I could see his hands trembling slightly. At 9 o'clock, we filed into the conference room. It was the largest meeting space in the facility, with a long table in the center and chairs lining the walls. Coach Stevens stood at the head of the table, his expression unreadable. Next to him stood David Chen and two other executives I recognized from the front office, Sandra Martinez, the team president, and James Cooper, the owner's representative. Everyone sit, Chen said, his voice carrying that corporate authority that made my skin crawl. We sat. I positioned myself near the back, Jaylen beside me. D-Train sat on my other side, his presence somehow reassuring. Tyler Young was across the room, arms crossed, watching carefully. Other veterans scattered throughout, guys who'd been in this league long enough to know what a meeting like this meant. Chen waited until everyone was settled, then cleared his throat. Thank you all for coming, he began, standing with his tablet in hand like it was a shield. I know this is unusual, calling a full team meeting during preseason, but the front office felt it was important to address something that's been happening within our organization. He paused, looking around the room. His eyes landed on me briefly before moving on. As you all know, we're in the final stages of roster construction. Opening night is next week, and we need to finalize our 15-man roster. This means difficult decisions have to be made. Not everyone currently on this team will make the final cut. The room was silent. A few guys shifted uncomfortably in their seats. One of those difficult decisions, Chen continued, involves Jaylen Carter. I felt Jaylen go rigid beside me. Carter was brought in as a second-round pick with a non-guaranteed contract, Chen said, reading from his tablet like Jaylen wasn't sitting right there in front of him. Over the past 2 weeks, we've evaluated his performance in practice and scrimmages. While he's shown flashes of potential, his production hasn't been consistent enough to warrant a roster spot at this time. He's cutting him, D-Train whispered. Right here, in front of everyone, Chen continued. Therefore, effective tomorrow, we'll be releasing Carter from his contract and... He didn't get to finish. D-Train stood up. The sound of his chair scraping against the floor echoed through the silent room. Everyone turned to look at him. That's not right, D-Train said, his voice clear and strong. Chen stopped mid-sentence, his expression shifting from corporate neutrality to irritation. Excuse me? I said that's not right, D-Train repeated, louder this time. You don't cut a kid who's been working his tail off every single day. A kid who hasn't been given a real chance to show what he can do. Mr. Thompson, Sandra Martinez interjected, her tone diplomatic but firm. I understand you may have personal feelings about this, but roster decisions are made by the front office and coaching staff. Players don't have input in these matters. Maybe they should, D-Train shot back. Because from where I'm sitting, you're making a mistake. And worse than that, you're doing it in the most disrespectful way possible, cutting him in front of his teammates like he's nothing. Chen's face hardened. This meeting was called to ensure transparency in our process. We believe in being direct and honest with our players. Honest? D-Train said, and I could hear the anger rising in his voice. You want to talk about honesty? Let's be honest about what this really is. This isn't about Carter's performance. This is about money. This is about you sending a message that you can do whatever you want, whenever you want, and nobody can question it. That's enough, Coach Stevens said, but his voice lacked conviction. No, it's not enough, another voice said. I turned to see who'd spoken. It was Marcus Hayes, our backup point guard, a quiet guy who rarely said anything in meetings. But he was standing now too. Dee's right, Hayes said. Carter deserves better than this. We all do. Then another player stood. Brandon Cole, one of our rookies. Then another. Jamal Rivers, a veteran shooting guard. One by one, players started standing up. Not all of them, but enough. 10 guys, then 12, then 15. I looked around the room in disbelief. Veterans and rookies. Stars and bench players, guys who usually couldn't agree on anything were unified in this moment. And then D-Train said the words that would change everything. If you cut Carter, he said, looking directly at Chen, then you're making a statement about what this organization values. And if that's the statement you want to make, then maybe some of us need to reconsider whether we want to be part of this organization. The room went silent. What D-Train had just said, the implication that players might request trades or create problems, was nuclear. It was the kind of thing that could destroy a locker room or force management's hand. Chen's face had gone red. Are you threatening this organization? I'm stating a fact, D-Train said calmly. You can cut one player today, but if you do, you'll lose the respect of everyone in this room. Is that worth it? Sandra Martinez stepped forward, her expression calculating. She was smarter than Chen, more politically savvy. She could see what was happening. A potential PR disaster, a locker room rebellion, headlines about a front office that didn't value its players. Let's take a breath here, she said smoothly. I think there's been a misunderstanding about the purpose of this meeting. No misunderstanding, Chen said sharply. We're making a roster decision, and these players need to accept. David, Martinez said, cutting him off with a look that could freeze water. A word. Outside. Now. Chen's jaw clenched, but he followed her out of the room. The other executive, James Cooper, followed them, leaving Coach Stevens alone at the front. Stevens looked around at all the players standing, his expression conflicted. He opened his mouth to speak, then closed it. He had nothing to say. Or maybe he had everything to say but didn't know how. Sit down, he finally said, his voice tired. Everyone just sit down. We sat, but the energy in the room had fundamentally changed. The players who'd stood hadn't just stood for Jaylen. They'd stood for something bigger, for the idea that they were more than assets, more than numbers on a balance sheet. They were human beings who deserved to be treated with dignity. 5 minutes passed in silence, then 10. Guys started whispering to each other. I could hear fragments of conversations, some supportive, some uncertain, some angry at what had just happened. I looked at Jaylen. Tears were running down his face, but he was trying to hide them, staring at the floor. I put a hand on his shoulder. It's going to be okay, I whispered. He shook his head. You don't know that. I do, I said. Because look around. Look at how many people just stood up for you. That means something. The door opened, and Martinez, Chen, and Cooper walked back in. Martinez's expression was composed, but Chen looked like he'd been forced to swallow poison. Coach Stevens straightened up, clearly unsure what was about to happen. Martinez took the center position, with Chen standing stiffly beside her. After discussions with the coaching staff and ownership, she began, her voice measured and professional. We've decided to take a different approach with our roster construction. Effective immediately, Jaylen Carter's contract will be converted to a guaranteed deal for the remainder of the season. The room erupted. Guys started clapping, some standing again, others shouting in celebration. I felt Jaylen's whole body sag with relief. D-Train was grinning, punching the air. Martinez held up a hand for quiet. Furthermore, she continued, we want to acknowledge that we may have rushed the evaluation process. Carter will be given a full and fair opportunity to develop and compete for minutes. That's a commitment from this organization. She looked around the room, her eyes landing on each player who'd stood up. We've also heard your concerns about transparency and respect, she said, and we're committed to improving how we communicate with the team. This is your organization as much as it's ours. Your voices matter. It was corporate speak, carefully crafted and politically safe, but it was also a victory. A small one, maybe, but a victory nonetheless. Chen looked like he wanted to say something, but Martinez shot him a look that kept him silent. Meeting adjourned, Stevens said quickly, clearly wanting this to end before anything else could happen. Players started filing out, the energy now celebratory. Guys were coming up to Jaylen, dapping him up, congratulating him. D-Train grabbed him in a bear hug that lifted him off the ground. Tyler Young walked over and nodded at him. A simple gesture, but coming from Tyler, it meant something. I stood back and watched it all happen. This kid who'd been invisible 2 days ago was suddenly surrounded by teammates, included, accepted. It was beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with basketball. D-Train walked over to me, still grinning. You see that? We did it, man. We actually did it. You did it, I said. That speech you gave. Nah, he interrupted. You started it. You helped the kid when nobody else would. You reminded us what it means to be a team. I just followed your lead. Before I could respond, Sandra Martinez approached. Her expression was friendly, but carried an undertone of warning. Mr. Reed, she said. Quite a morning, wasn't it? Yes, ma'am, I replied carefully. What you did for Carter, inviting him into your home, mentoring him, that was admirable, she said. It's the kind of leadership we value in this organization, but I hope you understand that going forward, any actions that could be perceived as interfering with front office decisions need to be communicated through proper channels. I'm not trying to interfere, I said. I'm trying to help. I understand, she said, and we appreciate that. Just remember that this is still a business. Emotions and personal relationships can complicate things. We need everyone focused on winning, not politics. With respect, ma'am, I said, what happened in there wasn't politics. That was players standing up for what's right. If that complicates the business, maybe the business needs to change. She studied me for a long moment, then smiled. A real smile this time, not corporate. You know, she said, we could use more players like you. Just try not to give David Chen a heart attack in the process. She walked away, leaving me standing there processing what had just happened. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Practice was lighter, the energy completely different from the tension of the past week. Guys were talking more, laughing more, playing with joy instead of fear. Even Coach Stevens seemed more relaxed, like a weight had been lifted. During a water break, Tyler Young came over to where I was standing with Jaylen. Hey, he said to Jaylen, I know I've been hard on you, but you earned this. Not because Marcus fought for you, but because you never gave up. That's respect. Jaylen nodded, clearly moved. Thank you, man. That means a lot. Tyler bumped fists with him, then looked at me. You too, old man. You're all right. I smiled. Careful, Tyler. People might think you're going soft. He laughed and walked away, and I realized something had fundamentally shifted in our team dynamic. We weren't just co-workers anymore. We were actually becoming a team. After practice, as we were heading to the locker room, D-Train pulled me aside one more time. You know what the best part of today was? He said. It wasn't just that we saved the kid's job. It's that we remembered who we are. We remembered that this game is supposed to be bigger than money and contracts and front office politics. It's supposed to be about brotherhood, about having each other's backs. You reminded us of that. I didn't do anything special, I said. Yeah, you did, D-Train replied. You were brave enough to care. In a league that teaches you not to care, that's revolutionary. That night, back at my apartment, Jaylen and I ordered pizza and sat on the couch replaying the day's events. I still can't believe it, he said, shaking his head. I went from thinking my career was over to having a guaranteed contract. It doesn't feel real. It's real, I assured him. You did this. You earned it by showing up every day and working hard, even when things looked hopeless. I couldn't have done it without you, he said, looking at me. You changed my life, Marcus. I don't know how to repay that. You don't need to repay anything, I said. Just do what you told me you'd do. When you make it, when you're established, help the next kid who needs it. That's how you repay it, by passing it forward. He nodded solemnly. I will. I promise. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, eating pizza and watching highlights on TV. And I realized something. I felt lighter than I had in years, like I'd been carrying a weight I didn't know was there, and it had finally been lifted. Helping Jaylen hadn't just changed his life. It had changed mine. It had reminded me why I fell in love with basketball in the first place. Not for the money or the fame or the endorsements, but for the game itself. For the beauty of people coming together for something bigger than themselves. For the moments of genuine human connection in a world that often felt cold and transactional. I'd spent 11 years being careful, being distant, protecting myself from getting hurt. And in doing so, I'd lost something essential. My humanity. My ability to connect. My willingness to be vulnerable. But in helping this one kid, in taking a risk and opening my home and my heart, I'd found those things again. And I'd discovered something else. I wasn't alone. When I'd needed them most, my teammates had stood up. They'd risked their own comfort and security to do what was right. And in that moment, we'd become more than just a collection of individual players. We'd become a brotherhood. Tomorrow we'd go back to practice. We'd compete and push each other and prepare for the season. There would be wins and losses, highlights and mistakes, moments of glory and moments of failure. But tonight, in this moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. I felt hope. Hope that maybe this league could be different. That maybe we could change the culture, one small act of kindness at a time. That maybe caring about each other wasn't a weakness but the greatest strength we had. And as I sat there next to Jaylen, watching him smile for the first time since I'd met him, I knew one thing for certain. Whatever happened next season, whatever challenges we faced, we'd face them together, as a team, as brothers, as men who'd learned that sometimes the most important victories happen off the court. 3 months later, the season was in full swing, and we were sitting at 22 wins and 15 losses, third place in our division, comfortably in the playoff picture. Not bad for a team that was supposed to be rebuilding, but the wins and losses weren't what made this season special. What made it special was sitting on the bench during our home game against the Lakers, watching Jaylen Carter check in for the first time in a meaningful game. Coach Stevens called his name during a timeout with 4 minutes left in the third quarter. We were up by 8, and Stevens wanted to give some of the starters a rest. Jaylen stood up, pulled off his warm-up, and jogged to the scorer's table. The crowd gave him a modest cheer, the kind you give to bench players, polite but not overwhelming. But in the huddle, guys were hyping him up. D-Train slapped him on the back so hard he nearly fell over. Tyler Young gave him a fist bump. Even the veterans who rarely showed emotion were smiling. "Go show them what you got, Rook," D-Train said. Jaylen nodded, his face a mixture of nerves and determination. I watched from my seat on the bench as he checked in. The ref handed him the ball for an inbound pass, and the game resumed. For the first 30 seconds, Jaylen looked tentative, staying in the corners, not touching the ball, just trying not to make mistakes. Then it happened. D-Train grabbed a defensive rebound and pushed the ball up the court. Jaylen filled the lane on the right wing, running hard. D-Train saw him and threw a perfect pass ahead. Jaylen caught it in stride, took 2 dribbles, and rose up for a layup. The Lakers defender met him at the rim, but Jaylen adjusted in mid-air, a move we'd practiced 100 times in those early morning sessions, and finished with a reverse layup off the glass. The crowd erupted. Jaylen backpedaled down the court trying to keep his composure, but I could see the smile breaking through. His first NBA points, in a real game, against the Lakers. Our bench went crazy. Guys were on their feet screaming, high-fiving each other. I stood up too, clapping, feeling a swell of pride in my chest that caught me off guard. Over the next 3 minutes, Jaylen played solid defense, grabbed a rebound, and even knocked down a corner 3-pointer off a pass from Tyler. When Coach Stevens finally subbed him out, the entire arena gave him a standing ovation. Jaylen jogged back to the bench, and every single player stood up to greet him. D-Train wrapped him in a massive hug. Tyler gave him dap. The veterans patted his head. And when he finally sat down next to me, I could see tears in his eyes. "You did it," I said quietly. He nodded, unable to speak, just breathing hard and trying to process what had just happened. After the game, which we won by 13, the locker room was electric. Music blaring, guys dancing, the kind of energy that comes from playing good basketball and having fun doing it. This team had come together in a way nobody expected. We weren't the most talented roster in the league, but we played harder than anyone, and we genuinely liked each other. Coach Stevens addressed the team briefly, praising our effort and focus, then turned to Jaylen. "Carter," he said, and the room quieted down. "Hell of a debut tonight. 6 points, 2 rebounds, solid defense. But more than that, you showed poise. You weren't afraid. You belonged out there." That's what we've been waiting to see. The locker room erupted again. Guys were shouting Jaylen's name, throwing towels at him, acting like he'd just won Finals MVP. It was over the top and ridiculous and absolutely perfect. As the celebration died down and guys started showering and getting dressed, I sat at my locker, taking it all in. This season had been different from any other in my career. Not because of my stats, I was averaging my usual 15 points per game, nothing special, but because of what it felt like. It felt meaningful. It felt like we were building something real. D-Train walked over and sat down next to me, still sweaty from the game. "You see the kid's face?" he said, grinning. "That's what it's all about, man. That's why we play." I nodded. "Yeah, that's why we play." D-Train was quiet for a moment, then said, "You know what you did for him? It changed more than just his life. It changed all of us. This locker room is different now. Guys actually care about each other. We look out for each other. That started with you." "I don't know about that," I said. "I do," D-Train insisted. "You showed us that it's okay to be vulnerable, that it's okay to care. In a league that tells you to protect yourself at all costs, you did the opposite, and it made us better. Not just as a team, but as people." I didn't know what to say to that, so I just nodded. After I showered and dressed, I found Jaylen waiting for me by my locker. He was holding his phone, and his eyes were red again. "What's wrong?" I asked, concerned. "Nothing's wrong," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I just got off the phone with my mom. She watched the game. She saw me play. She was crying, Marcus. She said she's so proud of me. She said she never thought she'd see this day." He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "And I realized something," he continued. "None of this happens without you. I'd have been cut 3 months ago. I'd be back home, working some dead-end job, wondering what could have been. But you gave me a chance. You believed in me when nobody else did. You changed my entire life." I put a hand on his shoulder. "You changed your own life, Jaylen. I just gave you a stable place to sleep and some meals. Everything else, the work, the improvement, the determination to keep going even when it looked hopeless, that was all you. He shook his head. It was both of us, and I'm never going to forget it. We walked out to the parking lot together. The Portland night was cold and clear, stars visible above the city lights. Jaylen had his own apartment now, a small one-bedroom place not far from mine, and he'd bought a used car with his first paycheck. He was still figuring out how to manage money, still learning how to be a professional, but he was getting there. "I'll see you tomorrow," he said, unlocking his car. "Tomorrow," I confirmed. As I drove home, I thought about how much had changed since that night I'd found Jaylen sitting on the gym floor, hungry and scared and alone. He'd grown so much, not just as a player, but as a person. He carried himself differently now, with confidence, with purpose, with the knowledge that he belonged. And I'd changed too. I wasn't the same Marcus Reed who'd spent 11 years keeping everyone at arm's length, protecting himself, staying silent. I'd learned that vulnerability wasn't weakness, that caring about people wasn't a liability, that sometimes the most important thing you can do is simply show up for someone who needs you. When I got home, I found a package waiting outside my door. No return address, just my name written in careful handwriting on the front. I brought it inside and opened it carefully. Inside was a framed photograph, a picture I didn't even know existed. It showed the team meeting from 3 months ago, the moment when players had stood up for Jaylen. Somehow, someone had captured it. D-Train was standing, his mouth open mid-speech. Other players were rising from their chairs, and in the corner, you could see me sitting next to Jaylen, my hand on his shoulder. Below the photograph was an engraving. "Brotherhood isn't given. It's earned. Thank you for reminding us what that means. Your team." I stared at that photograph for a long time, feeling something warm and full spreading through my chest. This was what I'd been searching for my entire career without knowing it. Not championships or all-star selections or maximum contracts. This, connection, purpose, the knowledge that I'd made a difference in someone's life. My phone buzzed. A text from my mom. "Watched the game tonight. Saw that young man you've been helping score his first points. I'm proud of you, baby. Not for the basketball, but for the man you've become. Your father would be proud too." I smiled. My mom didn't text often. She was old school, preferred phone calls, but when she did, it meant something. I texted back, "Thanks, Ma. Love you." Over the next few weeks, something interesting started happening. Other veterans in the league began reaching out to me, guys I'd played against for years but never really talked to. They'd heard the story about Jaylen. Word had spread through the player network, and they wanted to know more. Some were inspired to help rookies on their own teams. Some just wanted to say they respected what I'd done. One text stood out. It was from Ray Mitchell, the veteran who'd helped me during my rookie year. "Saw the news about you and that kid Carter. Made me smile. You remembered. You passed it on. That's all I ever wanted, for the kindness to keep moving forward. Proud of you, Marcus." I called him immediately. "Ray," I said when he answered. "Got your text." His deep voice came through the phone, warm and familiar. Marcus Reed, the quiet guy who turned out to be a leader. "How about that?" "I learned from the best," I said. We talked for an hour. He told me about his high school team, the kids he was coaching, the lessons he was trying to teach them about being good people, not just good players. I told him about Jaylen, about the team meeting, about how everything had changed. "You know what the beautiful thing is?" Ray said. "You're not doing this for recognition or praise. You're doing it because it's right. That's real leadership, Marcus. That's the kind that lasts." After we hung up, I sat on my couch, looking out at the city lights, thinking about legacy. What did I want to be remembered for when my career was over? The stats would fade, the highlights would be forgotten, but the impact you have on people's lives, that lasts forever. The season continued. We made the playoffs as a 6th seed and lost in the first round, but it felt like a victory just getting there. Jaylen played limited minutes throughout the season, but proved he belonged. More importantly, he'd become part of the team's culture, a symbol of what we stood for. On the last day of the season, Coach Stevens called me into his office. "Reed," he said, gesturing for me to sit. "Hell of a year. Thank you, Coach." He leaned back in his chair, studying me. "You know, when you first helped Carter, I thought you were being naive. I thought you were going to create problems for yourself and for me. But I was wrong. What you did, it set a tone for this entire team. It made us better. Not just at basketball, but at being a team. I appreciate that," I said. "The front office has been talking," he continued. "They want to extend your contract. They see you as a leader, a mentor figure. They want you here long term, not just as a player, but as part of the organization's future. What do you think? I thought about it for a moment. A year ago, I would have taken the money and the security without hesitation, but now, I had different priorities. I'll stay, I said, on one condition. What's that? I want a role in player development. I want to work with the young guys, help them transition to the league, make sure nobody falls through the cracks the way Jaylen almost did. Not officially, not in a coaching capacity, just as someone they can come to. A resource. A mentor. Coach Stevens smiled. I think we can arrange that. We shook hands, and I left his office feeling settled in a way I hadn't felt in years. That night I invited Jaylen over for dinner. I cooked something simple, just pasta and garlic bread, and we ate at the same table where we'd shared our first meal together 3 months ago. Got some news, I told him. I'm staying with the team. Extended my contract. His face lit up. That's amazing, Marcus. Wait, does this mean you'll be here for my whole contract too? Looks like it, I said. He grinned. Good. I still need you, man. Still learning. Still trying to figure all this out. You're doing fine, I assured him. Better than fine. You're thriving. Because of you, he said. You gave me the foundation, the stability, the belief that I could do this. I looked at him, this kid who'd arrived in Portland with nothing and was now building a career, building a life. And I realized that in helping him, I'd helped myself. I'd found purpose. I'd found meaning. I'd found the part of myself I'd lost somewhere along the way. You know what I think? I said. I think we helped each other. You reminded me why I love this game. You reminded me that basketball is about more than stats and contracts and endorsements. It's about people, about connection, about lifting each other up. Jaylen nodded, his eyes getting misty again. He was an emotional kid, wore his heart on his sleeve, and I loved that about him. In a league full of people trying to be tough and guarded, his vulnerability was refreshing. Can I ask you something? He said. Sure. When I make it, like really make it, when I'm established and earning real money, I want to do what you did. I want to help kids who are in the position I was in. Kids who have talent, but no support, no money, no family to fall back on. I want to create something, maybe a foundation or a program, something that makes sure nobody has to go through what I went through. Will you help me? I smiled. Absolutely. We'll do it together. We talked for hours that night, planning and dreaming and imagining what we could build. A program that provided housing and meals for undrafted rookies. A mentorship network connecting veterans with young players. Resources for financial literacy, mental health, life skills. All the things the league didn't teach you but expected you to figure out. It felt big. It felt important. It felt like we were starting something that could outlive our careers and change the culture of professional basketball. As Jaylen was leaving, he stopped at the door and turned back to me. Thank you, he said one more time, for everything, for seeing me, for believing in me, for saving my life. I walked over and pulled him into a hug. You saved mine too, I said. You reminded me how to be human again. After he left, I stood at my window, looking out at the city. Portland glowed beneath the night sky, alive and beautiful and full of possibility. Somewhere out there, other young players were struggling, scared, wondering if they'd make it. Somewhere, other veterans were keeping their heads down, playing it safe, protecting themselves from pain. And I thought about what Ray Mitchell had told me all those years ago, words I'd never forgotten. We're not just players, we're people, and people are supposed to take care of each other. That's what this was all about, not basketball, not fame or fortune or legacy, just people taking care of each other, just kindness passed forward from one generation to the next, just the simple revolutionary act of seeing someone who's struggling and deciding to help. I'd spent 11 years learning how to survive in this league, but in 3 months, Jaylen had taught me how to live in it, and that made all the difference. The next morning, I woke up early and went to the gym, not because I had to, but because I wanted to, because I loved it again. The sound of the ball hitting the floor, the swish of the net, the meditation of repetition and practice. As I was shooting, I heard the door open. I turned to see Jaylen walking in, gym bag over his shoulder, ready to work. Couldn't sleep? I asked. He grinned. Figured I'd get some extra work in. Keep improving. I tossed him the ball. Let's do it together then. We worked out for 2 hours, pushing each other, encouraging each other, building something that went beyond basketball. When we finished, we sat on the court, sweaty and tired and happy. You know what I realized? Jaylen said. This is my favorite part. Not the games or the cameras or the attention. This. Just working. Just getting better. Just being with someone who believes in me. Same, I said. This is the part I love too. We sat there for a while longer, just existing in that space, that moment of peace and purpose and connection. And I knew, without any doubt, that this was exactly where I was supposed to be. Not because of destiny or fate or some grand plan, but because I'd made a choice. I'd chosen to care. I'd chosen to help. I'd chosen to be vulnerable and open and human. And in making that choice, I'd found something I didn't even know I was looking for. I'd found home. Not in a place or a building or a city, but in the people around me, in the relationships I'd built, in the brotherhood we'd created. That was the real victory. That was the real legacy. And it all started with one simple act: sitting down next to a scared kid on a gym floor and asking if he was okay. Sometimes that's all it takes. One person caring enough to ask, one person brave enough to help, one person willing to remember that behind every jersey, every contract, every statistic, there's a human being who deserves dignity and respect and a chance. I'd learned that lesson 3 months ago, and I'd spend the rest of my career, the rest of my life, passing it forward. Because that's what brotherhood means. That's what basketball, at its best, is supposed to be about. And that's the story I'll tell when people ask me what I'm most proud of in my career. Not the all-star selections, not the championship ring, but the night I helped a rookie who had nothing to eat, and the next day, when my whole team stood up for me. That's the moment everything changed. That's the moment I became who I was always meant to be, and I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world.